Welcome everybody. I'm Allan, a Senior Advisor at Business Fights Poverty. I'm thrilled to be hosting this session today on how we try to build inclusion for all by working with business to put intersectionality into practice. As we're all aware, COVID-19 has highlighted stark inequalities across countries and within societies. But at the same time, we've seen some seismic movements calling for change, from Me Too to Black Lives Matter. So as we seek to rebuild better, how do we stop the pick and choose approach of tackling inequalities, be it gender or race, disability, sexuality, and rather have a strategy to examine and address multiple and overlapping or intersecting disadvantages? The business case for change is clear. More diverse companies simply are better companies. So as McKinsey have shown us in their latest report, companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on their executive teams are 25% more likely to be profitable. And for ethnic diversity, top quartile companies are 36% more likely to outperform on profitability. Now, businesses have been playing their part for some time now, implementing diversity and inclusion teams and strategies, ensuring more inclusive recruitment processes, and delivering on a number of corporate social responsibility initiatives. But we think it's time to end the hierarchy of social inequalities. And as someone who's worked on gender equality for many years, including on toolkits for business, I've had to take a good look at myself recently and ask whether I've been intersectional enough in my thinking and my understanding, or whether by solely focusing on gender, I've simply been sort of replacing the white patriarchy with a white matriarchy. After all, Black women are extremely poorly represented at executive and managerial levels across companies. So today, we're going to hear from some leading experts from a really great range of sectors on how business can take a more intersectional approach. And we're hopefully going to learn a little bit about some exciting examples, from marketing strategies to diversity and inclusion initiatives to social action and much more. Each panelist is going to speak for 3 minutes, and then I'm going to pose some questions. And it's a really deep and rich conversation in a very small amount of time. So we're all going to try our very best to keep to time and keep this as exciting and interesting as it is. So first of all, I'm going to go to our first speaker, Dr. Jane Pillinger. Jane is a world-renowned expert on gender equality, especially looking at issues of tackling violence and harassment in the workplace. So Jane, why does intersectionality matter? And have you seen any progress towards how companies are taking this approach when it comes to gender?
Yeah, thanks, Alice. And it's great to be talking about this issue. And yes, in my work, I've seen quite a lot of progress and a lot of discussion in moving towards a better understanding of intersectionality and what an intersectional approach could mean on gender, but it's by far not enough. I mean, I was thinking back to, I remember when Kimberly Crenshaw first defined intersectionality 30 years ago. I mean, it was a groundbreaking moment, and she did this to ensure that feminism took account of oppression, multiple forms of discrimination. But it's interesting because the issue has only really come into public discourse and in the world of work in the last decade. And today, and more companies are recognizing, the value of diversity and inclusion. They want to recruit and retain the best staff, the best talent. They're recognizing discrimination faced by Black women, LGBTI, and so on. But how far really has the progress been made in addressing multiple and intersecting discrimination and intersectionality? I'm not so sure. Observing companies and their strategies is that it tends to be on a group by group basis. This year we'll do LGBTI, next year we'll do disability. However, I think we're in the middle of quite a significant change at the moment. It's a hugely important issue today in the light of, and I agree with you, Alice, about Me Too, Time's Up, the Black Lives Movement and other social movements are really looking, and indeed some of the challenges that we're facing in relation to COVID-19 and the increase in domestic violence and recognition of that more and more businesses are beginning to respond. But we need to take the next step. We need for businesses to be perhaps representing themselves. I mean, in a way, the issue is that businesses are part of important societal institutions that can forge change, take proactive roles, work in partnership, and do this not just because it'll help their competitiveness, but also because they have a wider social purpose and role in shaping a society that is fair, equal, and respectful of all. And I think that's where intersectionality comes in. Just to give a really quick example, if we look at the gender pay gap, for example, we can look at the gender pay gap across an organization, across a company, but unless we dig deeper into the causes of the pay gap and look at, what is the pay gap for mothers? What is the pay gap for Black women, for women in lower paid, precarious or lower valued jobs? All of these issues are really important to really getting a better understanding of inequality. I work mainly in the area at the moment of gender-based violence, and it's absolutely essential that we address women's vulnerabilities and risks from an intersectional perspective. And if we don't take account of intersectionality and the discrimination experienced, particularly by racialized workers, particularly women, then our strategies to end gender-based violence are going to fail. So ending violence and harassment in the world of work needs also to be tied to ending discrimination. And that's why I think intersectionality can really help us, because it can help us look at the social norms that reinforce and perpetuate it. This means recognizing that discrimination takes place across multiple grounds around race, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender diversity, migration background, status. We know that some of the worst experiences of violence and harassment are from women who are in the most low paid and precarious jobs, domestic and care workers from migrant backgrounds, particularly vulnerable, and so on. And we know from many, many studies that LGBTI workers, that the issues are for sexual harassment for younger women, women with disabilities are real problems. So when we take account of these risks and vulnerabilities using an intersectional approach, I think it can really help us to look at how we can address these in our laws, in our business strategies, in our workplace policies and prevention programs, and I think offer us a real opportunity to really dig into the problems of discrimination and inequality.
Thank you so much, Jane. I know there's masses to say. That's fantastic. Thank you ever so much. We'll come on to the opportunities again a bit later. I'd like to now move on to hear from Sandra. So Sandra Kerr is a Director of Race at Business in the Community, a UK organisation that launched the Race at Work Charter, which I think has 400 signatories now, and amongst other things, calls for an ethnicity pay gap reporting. So Sandra, tell us more about that, and over to you.
Thank you. So I think the big issues that obviously the virus has highlighted, the disproportionate impact, first of all, on ethnic minority communities, so Black and Asian people who are overrepresented in some of the key workers, frontline services, transport, and cities that had to continue to operate even when other workers could actually start to work at home. And then also it spotlighted the impact of them being more likely to be on some of the lower paid pay scales, which meant also more likely to be in rented accommodation, cramped housing, social distancing. All of those things became a challenge, and that I think has contributed to some of the disproportionate volumes of contagion from the virus. You set out at the outset, we know about the McKinsey study about the 36% actually better financial returns for more ethnicity at senior levels, but we also know that it's actually worth, in the UK, our government has sponsored a review, we know it's actually worth 24 billion per annum to the UK to tackle all the different racial disparities across the labour market. And if you think about, economic downturns and challenges, it has to be in the advantage of any government or any society to actually make that recovery as easy as possible, so that you can tap into the benefits for all of us that would be gained by doing this. It's also spotlighted, so more likely to be in unstable work, fixed term contracts, 0-hour contracts, and what we know from the last economic downturn in 2008, in 2010, which is 2 years later, 60% of Black and Asian people had no savings at all. So there is all of the things that I've kind of talked about create a lack of financial resilience when shocks like this come into play. Yeah. And we also know from data from our government, as far as, on a website, Ethnicity Facts and Figures website, where they've put the data and insight in the public domain. In 2014, 29% of Black women would report a common mental health disorder. So anxiety, depression, stress. And then if you think about, I know there's never been a big campaign to tackle mental health in women or ethnic minority women. So then you think about the pandemic and the disproportionate volume of death, contagion, and then the Black Lives Matter, traumas, then you realize that there is an issue around mental health that I think we definitely need to be looking at. And we've been encouraging employers to actually, make sure as at least basic self-stuff that managers are checking in with their employees, that they look at training people on mental health first aid internally, who can be, spaces for people to talk about these issues. So that becomes really, really important. And when we saw the Black Lives Matter kind of challenges, the kind of the peaceful protests all around the world, we called on leaders, organizations to think about leadership. So how can they ensure voice? So at the top table, how do you know that when you're making decisions that are going to impact people from different backgrounds, and particularly that intersectionality with social backgrounds where they don't have those connections to be at that top table, how are you going to ensure you hear their voice so you can take those voices on board for decisions that will impact them? The second area we called for action was around allyship. So we saw white and Black people peacefully kind of demonstrating to say we need change. So how do you mobilize that voice and encourage those who want to stand up to actually speak up and be that voice where people, different voices of ethnic minority people are not present? And then the third area was encouraging employers to really listen to their employees, actively listen, and also recognize that those employers can help them connect to the communities who are often right behind the queue when it comes down to voluntary action, investment, and maybe supporting of enterprise. So I will stop there as some of the challenges that I'm setting out.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Sandra. Some interesting ones we can come back to, definitely around allyship. Zubair, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So Zubair Junjunia is a One Young World ambassador. And when he was 16 years old, founded ZNotes, which is a community-led learning platform that is on a mission to end educational inequality and has reached millions of students globally. So Zubair, can you say a little bit about the role of technology and its potential to enhance equality?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alice. The fact that I'm sitting here and speaking to you today is testament to the fact that a 16-year-old's blog turned into a global phenomena and reached, first thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people around the world. And technology has provided this incredible solution for us for scalability. Firstly, the fact that whatever idea, whatever resource you create can now reach, hundreds of thousands of people with a click of a button. And with the internet, the fact that there's a reach that's just profound. We could never think about these kind of numbers 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when our circles of communications were so limited to those who were around us, those who lived close by to us, and for some of us, the ability to travel and meet others. So the technology is a great enabler for enhancing equality, but I think there are two very key components. An example for which ZNotes is that actually relates to how equality can actually be taking place. So one of them is the mission, and as you said, ours is about ending education inequality. If you have a solution which is, on a mission to enhance equality, it needs to be front, right, and center. It needs to be part of the way the organization works. It's about how the people behave on that platform, how every next feature that's developed for that solution is thought about, because it has to relate to that mission. And number two is community. And I say community and not team, because a team is incredible, right? They're the people who are building, who are like spending their days and nights thinking about what's the best way to improve the solution. But a team can only be, 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people if you're huge. But a community is what makes a solution live forever. It is people who believe in your mission, who believe in your solution, and who believe that what you've created can actually impact, those around them. So with us, I founded it as a 16-year-old, but the fact that I'm talking still about it, and I'm still developing and building it and finding new and more people to kind of get involved on this project with, is because of the community, because students from all over the world contributed, added to that platform and grew it. But while I'm on this topic, technology is incredible, and it can really solve so many issues for us. I do want to remind us that today we're speaking and being able to see each other. Many of us are listening from our homes, but we are privileged to do so. We are sitting in front of a computer. We're sitting in front of an awesome internet connection to be able to stream live to you. And this is a privilege, and we must not forget that there are millions out there who do not have this. So we must think about solutions that involve technology to enhance equality, but we must remind ourselves that we don't exasperate this inequality by forgetting those who do not have access. That's me.
Great. Thanks ever so much, Zubair. Yes, access. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to move us on now to hear from David Grayson. So David is a world-leading academic on corporate social responsibility, and formerly chaired a National Disability Council in the UK. And he's also chair of Carers UK. So David, can you tell us a little bit more about how fundamental support for caring is to enable greater equality? Definitely great to be hearing about this systemic issue.
Alice, absolutely. You very noticeably didn't include unpaid carers, caregivers in your introduction. And I think part of a rounded discussion of intersectionality needs to start from an inclusive perspective of the different groups we're talking about. And I think all too often in these kinds of discussions, we forget the hundreds of millions of people across the world who at any one time are caring unpaid for a family member or a friend who needs their help because, for example, they have a physical or mental disability, they have some long-term health condition, perhaps they're simply growing older and more frail and need help. And of course, many of those people who are unpaid carers are people who are also juggling their job and caring for their loved one. We reckon in the UK, that's something now like around 1 in 7 of the average workplace will be juggling their job and caring for a loved one. In places like Australia, a little bit less, 1 in 8. Canada, we think possibly 1 in 3, and so on. So I think, and we also know, by the way, that during the COVID crisis, certainly at least here in the UK, that the numbers of unpaid caregivers has massively increased. There were just over 9 million carers before the pandemic started. That's increased by 50% during the lockdown, as paid care workers have had to stop going to people's homes, respite care, daycare centres and so on have all had to be closed. So this is a really significant issue. We're possibly talking as many as 700 million people across the world, maybe 300 million juggling job and caring for a loved one. And I think there's some very practical things that a good employer can do as an integral part of a more comprehensive approach to diversity and inclusion. Because the majority of those unpaid caregivers will be women. Many of them will themselves have their own health issues, particularly amongst older carers. And we know, for instance, and Sandra was just commenting on the importance of tackling mental health more urgently. We know, certainly from our state of caring research in the UK, something like 80% of long-term carers feel isolated, and social isolation then of course becomes a harbinger of depression and mental ill health. The practical things that employers can do is, first of all, understand who are their working carers, asking as part of an annual employee survey, for example, looking at every policy that they have for their people and thinking about how do we carer-proof it. That may be flexible working. We've seen this incredible phenomenon across the world of working from home, with many organizations saying that you can continue to work from home indefinitely into the future, at least for part of your working week. How do we capitalize on that to help people who are also caring for a loved one? I think just as many good organizations have employee networks for employees who are LGBT plus or who are disabled employees and so on, so good employers have networks for their working carers. And one of the crucial things, and a real early win that is available for any employer, is to get much better at cross-fertilizing the learning between their different employee networks. But above all, I want to make the case, not just on behalf of Carers UK, we're part of a European-wide network of Euro carers, part of also of a IARCO, an international alliance of care organizations. I want to make the case that we need to think carers in a much more integrated approach to intersectionality.
Super. Thanks so much, David. And I think there's also a fascinating discussion to be had about the opportunity of building and encouraging governments to develop a caring economy as well. Okay, super. I'm going to move us on now to Jodie. Jodie Harris is Global Vice President of Marketing, Culture and Capabilities, which I think is a fascinating title in itself and would love to know more about, at AB InBev, which is the world's largest brewing company. And I know from some work with ABI that they've done some great work on busting gender stereotypes through some of their brands in South Africa, and have also got some really interesting diversity and inclusion policies. So Jodie, can you tell us a little bit more about how the company is pulling some of this work together?
Sure, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me on behalf of AB InBev, but also thank you for bringing visibility to this very important topic. It's a challenge for every business, for sure. And personally, for me, I am a woman, but not all women are the same, as we know. I have a Jewish husband, and I'm bringing up 2 children in an interfaith family, and not to mention juggling career and caretaking as well. So thank you for that, David. So intersectionality is a very important topic. And AB InBev, as you know, is the world's leading brewer and CPG company. We have over 170,000 colleagues around the world in over 100 countries. And our purpose as a company is to bring people together for a better world. And beer has for centuries been doing that. But unfortunately, the industries that we operate in, both beer as well as advertising, have been historically oriented toward traditional portrayals of men and masculinity, predominantly white men. And even though women purchase 75% of beer that's sold globally, and over 30% of all beer consumed with women worldwide. And also research, there's recent research that has just been published in the advertising industry that shows that commercials and digital videos are more likely to have male characters who have more screen time, who have more speaking time than women, and it's far, far worse with women of color. Yet we know that when you portray women in an accurate, positive light, progress is made, purchases are made, and brand love increases as well. And as marketers, we have a tremendous responsibility. Right? We're the champions of consumers and customers inside of our organizations. And as marketers, we're also the caretakers of our brands. And so we have to start with the inside. and to use our most important tool, which is our voice. Our marketing team, our composition, and this is the first point I'd like to make, it's really shifted over the past few years. Globally, we're now 50-50 men-women ratio, including our senior leadership. And it's actually helped us to bring greater capabilities, greater voice, greater perspective from data scientists, product developers, creative directors, who've really helped us to understand different aspects of women and building empathy so that, our products, our brands, can better reflect and relate with women. So it becomes personal as well. But it doesn't stop there, right? This is a story of evolution. We need to reflect a more diverse and ever-changing environment as our consumers and our communities continue to evolve as well beyond gender. And it's also about getting better, right? It's by investing, really. It's in the resources, it's in the partnerships that help us to continuously learn and make progress. So for example, we've elevated our Center of Creative Excellence. We've embedded D&I into the development and execution processes of all of our creative work. This includes our research methodologies. This includes diversity on our creative councils as well as our advisories. This is bias training for everyone in our organization. And it's even rewarding people behind some of the brave work and campaigns that are championing D&I. We have an internal creative festival that we call Creative X, and that really drives momentum and recognition of people really driving the change. And then in fact, some of this brave work has helped us to bring about significant visibility for women. And in sports, as an example, through our partnerships with the National Women's Soccer League, as well as media allocation resources to promote women's football viewership during prime time in our Argentina market. And then lastly, from a partnership perspective, for 2 years now, we've been an advisory member with the Association of National Advertisers, #SeeHer. And it's providing us with education, it's providing us with data via their gender equality measurement testing, as well as tools to help us as well as our creative partners to evolve.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much for that overview of how the whole company is starting to take these issues seriously from all the different angles. Our final speaker is Maria Noel Baisa, who is Regional Director of the Americas and Caribbean and former Head of Programs at UN Women HQ. Maria, can you tell us a little bit about how intersectional feminism can be a driving force to helping companies play a role in achieving the SDGs and how UN Women can help with this?
Thank you very much for having us, and also for this amazing question that for us is fundamental, because we are trying to work very, very closely with the private sector. Particularly in my region, we have an amazing program that is called Win-Win, because we want to bring the awareness by having inclusion of women of all genders, of all races, because don't forget that in my region, we have 30 million of women that are indigenous of different ethnies, and we have 125 million of Afro-descendant women. And normally, if we talk about, for example, pay gap in our region, in the white women, if you want, we don't have white women really per se, because we're all intersected with indigenous, Afro-descendant, mestizos, what we call. But we have a different pay gap for Afro-descendant and indigenous that we have for women that have access to this education. So let me say that there are, I would say, 5 points that I would like to make. The first one is, how do we continue pushing for integrating policies in the private sector? And for that, we are using as a vehicle the 7 principles of women economic empowerment, where when you sign that, we provide a set of advice. We have a tool that is free for the companies, so the companies can see themselves how they are in terms of intersectionality, in terms of inclusiveness of women. So the way to try to eliminate the discriminations on intersectionalities of women is by generating these new policies, by generating networks, by making sure that the leaders of the companies are aware that they need to change their mentality, not because it's only a human rights issue, but because it's a good business. And that's why we call it win-win, because you win in terms of being inclusive with other parts of the society, but you also win by carving a niche of your company, particularly to appeal in the millennium consumers, that they are much more conscious of what they are buying in terms of products and services. And also generating this collaborative ambiance environment in the companies. And we are seeing it. I just came from, I was in Chile virtually in a very interesting discussion with more than 500 people on the energy sector, energy and mining sector, where women are only 20%. And what we are seeing is a move, is a change, because when women are acting in the mining sector, when they are given their opportunity, the company increases productivity. Women are much more careful handling the high machinery. Women are much more careful in terms of handling, all the processes. So that immediately becomes aware to the managers that provides opportunity that women have a different way of doing things. So by being inclusive, they're gaining. And for us, the intersectionality is not only race, is ethnia, but it's also disability, as Jody has mentioned. We have enormous progress in Argentina and Brazil in this respect, because, we have more than 20% of the population of Latin America has disabilities. And I'm afraid that with the pandemic, we will have much more disabilities in terms of mental health. We are seeing it, that this is affecting a lot of women, not only with violence against women that has been rampant in my region, unfortunately, but also because this is something that is here to stay. We don't know when we're gonna be out, right? So in a nutshell, we believe very strongly that it's a win-win process that we need to continue demonstrating in all the sectors, not only the traditional sectors where women are, tourists, restoration, services of, hospitality, etc., but also in the hard sectors of the economy, like hard industries. Brilliant. So I'm happy to continue, but I know that you will close me.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Marie-Noelle. Okay, we're going to go on to some questions. I know everyone will be bursting to want to talk to each other, let alone everyone else out there want to ask you questions. But I wondered, I'm going to go to David, Zubair and Jody to ask you if in a word or a sentence, you could illustrate what you think the biggest challenges are to achieving a more intersectional approach in the workplace. Is it language? Is it leadership? Is it culture? David, can I go to you first?
I thought we were going to be unmuted automatically, but
there we go.
Right. So I think the really important issue is around the culture of the organization, because all too often we have organizations, as you said, Alice, much earlier, there is this year we'll do disability, next year we will do LGBT plus, etc. What is really important is an organization that is committed to creating an inclusive and engaging and empowering culture, which therefore sees each individual employee as an individual with a whole set of different issues. And in order to create that kind of culture and to sustain it, requires, of course, tone from the top and tone from above as well. So particularly line managers and particularly line management training.
Perfect.
So
perfect. Perfect. Really no more. That's perfect. I think that's a great illustration of culture as a potentially a barrier, but is the big opportunity as well if we can shift the culture of an organization. Zubair, can I come to you? What do you think are the barriers?
Well, David's stolen my thunder because I was going to go with culture as well. But it's absolutely just resonating with what David just said, it's about building the kind of the morals, the values, the systems of belief that your company, your entity is shaped around. And I mentioned mission right at the start. If your mission is driven to those social goals, we've talked about the SDGs in this conversation right now. If you're directly linked to thinking about how can we make this world a better place, how can we create a positive social impact around us, I think it's just, it's obviously going to happen that you're going to create a culture of people who are going to be obviously thinking about diversity and inclusion.
Brilliant. So purpose, company's purpose is a big opportunity. Jodie, as a company that's been doing this, what have been some of the challenges you faced?
I would say, the biggest barrier, and it's probably not only us, is that D&I, or let's talk D&I total, right, has been seen as a special project, right? And many companies, we don't, but many companies out there treat it as a one-size-fits-all solution where, quotas could fulfill that gap in the short term. But that flies in the face of what intersectionality is really all about. And, I think it takes commitment, it takes investment, it takes hard work, and it takes time. These things don't change, it doesn't change overnight. And just to echo one of the points that was made earlier, it's about investing in your leadership, in your people, right? Especially as you start to create more of a balanced leadership group. We've hired Ariely and Company, a specialist executive development firm, to really focus in on women's leadership and development that's personalized to each individual. So it's not just a one size fits all.
Super. That's another reference to no one size fits all, which I think absolutely sums up this agenda. Okay, coming on to the opportunities. So I was going to go to Jane and Sandra and Maria Noel to give us some examples or inspiration that you've heard about where you think the big opportunities are to make improvements.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples. There's lots of fantastic examples coming from the business sector, from the community sector, from workers themselves. And I'd maybe just like to give one example. And I want to come back to the issue of violence and harassment at work, because it's, I'm passionate about ending it, and passionate about ending a gender-based approach and taking an intersectional approach to that. And there's a number of companies, AB InBev is one of them, also Vodafone and a few other companies that are now introducing global policies on ending domestic violence. They're saying no to domestic violence, and they're doing really, really good work in establishing policies that support their employees who are experiencing domestic violence, helping them to stay in their work, giving them, for example, Vodafone took the lead on this first. AB InBev and other companies have also done the same, to give 10 days paid domestic violence leave to help with restructuring of your work, helping with, in some cases, some companies are helping with giving loans and financial support, because we know that financial abuse is one of the big issues that some women face. And, when you take an intersectional perspective and you look at the barriers and difficulties for women in leaving violent partners, often it's women from migrant backgrounds, women who have been, I suppose, controlled and their finances controlled, and who don't have an independent income, find it very, very difficult to leave. So the company programs that are being developed are really inspiring. They're backed by UN Women. It's in the new ILO Convention on Violence and Harassment at Work. And I just want to say a quick word about this, because I was an expert to the ILO in the development of this new convention. And for me, it's groundbreaking, because it not only promotes a gender-based approach, but it promotes an approach to dealing with violence and harassment in the world of work for all workers, whether they're informal workers, whether they're in paid and salaried work, but also takes into account domestic violence and the impact of domestic violence at work. So I think, this is a great opportunity. It was voted for by thousands and thousands of employers and workers and governments across the world in the International Labour Conference. And there's great support now for ratification.
Brilliant. Jane, I'm going to have to stop you there, but thank you so much. And yes, everybody should read the convention, C190. Sandra.
What I've seen, so we have seen more than 170 employers signing up to the Race at Work Charter in recent weeks. And that's about commitment to continue, not just an initiative, but to really drive forward change, leadership through to progressing talent in the workplace. So that's a key area. I commend every employer. We have some employers who've voluntarily published their ethnicity pay gaps, not waiting on legislation, wanting to be as transparent as pay. And I think that will tackle, at least put a spotlight on some of the issues we've already talked about there. We're seeing more and more employers wanting now to look at allyship movements, I would say, rather than programs, trying to move this, not just a one-off, oh, let's sign up, but let's continue to speak up and make change across the board. Setting targets, recognizing need to look at demographic data. How can we ensure that actually the changes that are implemented, when we look at it 1 year on, 2 year on, there's real progress? And then finally, I think supply chains are really looking at enterprise as well. How can they ensure inclusion there, be it with women, people from different backgrounds who are setting up enterprises, how they can include them in supply chains, that recovery.
Super, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's a great example. Maria Noel.
Thank you. Let me say 4 things. For me, the most important opportunity is the changing of the mindset of the leader towards an organizational culture and organizational responsibility towards inclusion. So the more you guys in Europe and the US push the international companies to do that, the more we trickle down to the different countries, in my region at least, to mirror that, because they will see that that's the way to go, right? So it is very, very important to keep this leadership very much engaged and in this change of organizational culture. Then for us, it's extremely important to dismantle an equal corporate culture. And to dismantle that, we have to tackle stereotypes, the status quo that associate with an identity to be a leader. We have to tackle that. And also to adopt a long-term holistic approach to addressing all forms of discrimination, because it's not only women, as we were talking on intersectionality. Also, the opportunity is the technology gap. As Zubair said, there are so many people that haven't reached computers, that haven't reached this world of Zoom. So we need to work harder to remove completely this gap that exists of women accessing technology. So we have this brilliant opportunity to try to do that. So hopefully we can be together with the private sector, because the more the poor people reach technology, the more they're going to be in the market. So it is a benefit also for products and services of companies. So this is essential. And with that, financial inclusion via technology, the fintechs. We are seeing in my region, for example, home workers, domestic workers, they are becoming a part of a platform that provides them with opportunities of work, but also credits. For the first time, these people, they never had access to a bank, and now they're having access to fintech, right? So for me, this is critical in order to make sure that if they have independence, economic independence, they're not going to be victims of violence anymore, you know? So we have to think about that. Also eliminated the pay gap. And as I said, this is critical because it's so frustrating and it's so unjust that we need to continue working on that. And including the supply chain, including the different intersectionalities in the supply chain. So gradually you're becoming to make entrepreneurs in a much bigger and fast way. So I think it's in our hands, those opportunities. And we have to focus on that, because otherwise, with 40 million people that are going to be unemployed in my region, of 660 million people, and 40% of my region is going to be in poverty because of the consequence, we are going to become a terrible region otherwise. We're going to be like Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's why we have to look into the opportunities, to look into the positive aspects of technology. And the last is continue pushing girls to study STEM.
Super. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria Noel. I think as you know, as it's clear, there are lots of challenges and lots of opportunities. I think they swing into each other nicely. So we've heard about culture, we've heard about leadership, about the importance of mission and purpose. There's some really exciting initiatives you can find out more about, whether it's the ILO Convention, whether it's the Race at Work Charter. There's fascinating work going on with women-owned enterprises that companies can source from. There's plenty out there. There's the fundamental structural issues around caring economies and around access to finance. So lots of great ways that we can make progress. So before we sort of wrap up, I'd just like to go and ask each of our fantastic contributors to leave us with a key takeaway. Perhaps it was something that you heard in this session, or perhaps it's something you're going to take away and do differently moving forward. So can I go first to back to David for his key takeaway?
So talking about tools and resources, in Carers UK, we have a campaign called Employers for Carers, which now involves several hundred public sector organisations as well as businesses and third sector organisations. And I think one of the very practical things that corporate responsibility coalitions around the world could do is to replicate the kind of model that we have successfully implemented over the last 15 years or so in our Employers for Carers initiative. Lots of very practical tools to help individual employers take this forward.
Thank you very much. Zubair.
So as the youngest person in this room, I've been like a sponge soaking up all this amazing experiences and information. I want to paint a little bit of a positive image, and I want to talk about the beauty of intersectionality. The fact that these intersections exist, these mixed cultures, races, languages. It's beautiful. It's truly what can create incredible solutions in this world. So we should just celebrate the fact that more and more intersections are being created. Fantastic. That's a really nice message. Thank you. Jodie.
Okay, building onto that, it's the togetherness, right? When we break down the barriers of divisiveness, we can all come together. And Zubair, to what you said about building communities can be so powerful to keep progressing along.
Super. Who am I up to next? Jane.
Well, I think the first thing is it's just fantastic to be having this discussion, and that, it's a discussion about intersectionality and gender discrimination as a business issue that we need to take forward. And I think that's really important. And I suppose my takeaway, and something I believe is really important, and company strategies can help develop this, is how can we enable women to stand in their own shoes so that all women in all sectors, in all countries, from all backgrounds, can have a voice and agency and build the better for the future.
Thank you, Jane. Sandra?
I think my takeaways, when I think about allyship, it's everyone standing up for everyone else, really. Those who are not carers stand up for those who are. Those who have enterprises stand up for those who don't, and those who have opportunities standing up for those who don't. So I think having that across all the intersectionalities, everyone standing up and speaking up, we see there's a chance to do so. That's what I take away. I think it's really important. All of us in it together.
Super. I love that message. And Maria Noel, final words.
Well, thank you so much. For me, it's the economy of care that we really need to build in order to ensure that women go to work. And let me explain. For me, the economy of care allows women to make sure that their kids and their people that are ill, or disability, with age, etc., that those populations that they care so much, they are well cared. We start a new set of labor, and we also start a new set of economy that will enable women finally to be 50% of the population that are working in the world.
Super. I think that's a lovely note to end on. I can't thank you all enough for your time and punctuality. And it's been a pleasure listening to you all today. Thank you so much.